In a world where social media influence often trumps real-world heroism, two forces were about to collide in an unforgettable confrontation. A celebrated Hollywood actress known for her humanitarian work faced off against a social media personality who valued followers over human dignity. What happened next would not only silence a room, but reverberate across social media platforms worldwide. Comment where you're watching from today as we dive into this powerful story of respect, dignity, and standing up for what's right. The upscale restaurant Bellissimo was bathed in warm amber lighting that evening, crystal chandeliers casting elegant shadows across marble floors. Located in the heart of Los Angeles, it was the kind of establishment where reservations were made months in advance, where Hollywood deals were sealed over perfectly seared Wagyu and vintage wine. The air hummed with quiet conversation and the occasional burst of laughter from patrons who were accustomed to the finer things in life. At a corner table, partly secluded by a decorative screen of frosted glass, sat Aaron Brooks, a man whose presence commanded respect not because of wealth or fame, but because of sacrifice. His posture was military straight. His hands, one bearing a slight tremor, rested on the crisp white tablecloth. Despite the elegant setting, there was something about Aaron that stood apart from the polished veneer of the other diners. Perhaps it was the quiet dignity in his eyes, or the way he carried himself with unassuming confidence. Aaron had not planned to dine at Bellissimo that evening. The reservation had been a gift from his daughter, a celebration of his 55th birthday and the 15-year anniversary of his return from his final tour in Afghanistan. After serving 22 years in the army, reaching the rank of Master Sergeant, Aaron had returned home with both visible and invisible scars of war. The Purple Heart pinned discreetly to his lapel told only part of his story. "Sir, would you care for a drink while you wait for the rest of your party?" asked the server, a young man named Benjamin Gardner, who approached the table with professional courtesy. "Just water for now, thank you," Aaron replied with a warm smile. "My daughter should be arriving shortly." Benjamin nodded respectfully, noting the Purple Heart pin. "It would be my honor to serve you tonight, sir. Thank you for your service." As Benjamin walked away, the main entrance to the restaurant opened, bringing with it a flutter of excitement. Chelsea Johnson, a social media influencer with millions of followers across various platforms, made her entrance with the practiced poise of someone accustomed to being filmed at all times. Behind her, a young assistant held up a smartphone, capturing Chelsea's every move for her legion of admirers. Chelsea was the epitome of what many called new celebrity, famous primarily for being famous, for curating a lifestyle that millions aspired to but few could achieve. Her perfectly contoured face, designer outfit, and the casual confidence with which she navigated the space spoke of someone who had grown comfortable with attention and privilege. "Chelsea, over here!" called out the restaurant manager, Adam Gutierrez, who quickly approached to greet her. "Your usual table is ready. We've ensured everything is prepared, exactly as you requested." Chelsea's smile was dazzling, practiced to perfection. "Wonderful, Adam. You know I only promote the very best to my followers. I'm planning to feature Bellissimo in my Elite Dining Experiences series tonight." The other diners watched this exchange with varying degrees of interest. Some rolled their eyes discreetly, others straightened in their seats, hoping to appear in the background of whatever content Chelsea was creating. Aaron Brooks observed quietly from his corner, his expression neutral but thoughtful. As Chelsea was escorted to her table, the restaurant's prime spot with perfect lighting and a view of both the interior and the city lights beyond the windows, she passed near Aaron's table. Her assistant, still filming, panned the camera around the restaurant to capture the ambiance. "Excuse me," Aaron said politely as the assistant's elbow nearly knocked over his water glass. "Would you mind being a bit careful with that camera?" Chelsea turned, her smile faltering slightly at the interruption to her carefully choreographed entrance. She gave Aaron a quick once-over, noting his simple but dignified attire, not designer, not trendy, just a good suit worn by a man who didn't frequent establishments like Bellissimo regularly. "Sorry about that," she said, though her tone lacked sincerity. "We're just capturing content, you understand." Aaron nodded politely. "Of course. Enjoy your evening." Chelsea's focus had already shifted away, her attention caught by someone she recognized at another table, Angelina Jolie, who sat quietly conversing with a colleague about their upcoming humanitarian project. Unlike Chelsea's dramatic entrance, Angelina had slipped into the restaurant with minimal fuss, her natural elegance and the purposeful intensity in her eyes drawing more genuine attention than any staged arrival could. Chelsea's eyes widened with opportunity. Being seen with Angelina, perhaps even getting her in the background of her content, would be an engagement goldmine. She whispered instructions to her assistant to ensure they were capturing the right angles, then continued to her table, strategically positioned to keep Angelina in frame. As the evening progressed, the restaurant filled to capacity. Aaron checked his watch, a slight furrow of concern crossing his brow. His daughter, Amanda Kim, had texted that she was running late. An emergency at the hospital, where she worked as a surgeon, had required her attention. "Take your time," he had replied. "People need you more than I do right now." At Chelsea's table, the performance was in full swing. Each dish was meticulously arranged before being photographed from multiple angles. Her commentary, delivered in practiced enthusiasm just loud enough for nearby tables to hear, reviewed everything from the texture profile of the appetizers to the aesthetic cohesion of the plating. "Make sure you get this angle," she instructed her assistant, adjusting a glass of champagne to catch the light better. "My followers need to see how the bubbles catch the light. That's what separates amateur content from influencer level." Aaron signaled to Benjamin, who had been checking on him periodically. "I think I'll order now. My daughter's been held up at the hospital. She's a surgeon." "Of course, sir," Benjamin replied with genuine respect. "That's admirable work she does. What would you like to start with?" As Aaron placed his order, a commotion near the entrance drew attention. A man had arrived and was engaged in what appeared to be a disagreement with the host. Even from a distance, certain details were apparent. His military bearing, the prosthetic limb visible below his trouser leg, and the dark complexion of his skin, which stood in contrast to the predominantly white clientele of Bellissimo. "I understand." "The dress code," the man, Daniel Jackson, was saying calmly but firmly. "And I am wearing appropriate attire. I have a reservation." The host, Brittany Wyatt, seemed flustered. "Sir, I'm not seeing your reservation in our system and we're fully booked tonight. Perhaps there was a miscommunication." Daniel maintained his composure. "Please check again. Reservation for Jackson. Party of 1, 8:09 p.m. I confirmed it personally yesterday." As this exchange continued, Chelsea's attention was drawn away from her content creation. She watched the scene with open curiosity, then leaned toward her assistant. "Are you getting this?" she whispered. "This could be interesting for the channel." The assistant adjusted the phone to capture the developing situation, though trying to be discreet about it. At the entrance, Adam Gutierrez had now joined the conversation, checking the reservation system himself. "I do apologize, Mr. Jackson. It seems there was some sort of system error. Your reservation is indeed here, but..." "But?" Daniel prompted. "Well, we're currently at capacity," Adam explained, though his eyes darted around the restaurant where at least 2 tables sat empty. "Perhaps we could offer you a spot at the bar until something opens up." Daniel's expression remained controlled, but his eyes reflected understanding of what was happening. This wasn't the first time he had encountered such system errors that somehow affected him more than others. "The bar won't work for me," he said, gesturing subtly to his prosthetic leg. "Standing for extended periods is difficult. I specifically requested a table when I made the reservation." From his corner, Aaron Brooks had been watching the exchange with growing concern. He recognized something in Daniel Jackson that perhaps others in the restaurant did not, the unique brotherhood of those who had served. Though they had never met, Aaron could read the signs. The way Daniel stood, the disciplined control in his voice even when facing adversity, the quiet dignity that no civilian slight could diminish. Chelsea, meanwhile, had begun narrating the situation in hushed tones to her phone. "Witnessing a little drama at Bellissimo tonight. Seems like someone's trying to get in without a proper reservation. This place is exclusive for a reason, followers. You can't just walk in and expect..." Her commentary was interrupted by the sound of a chair pushing back. Angelina Jolie had risen from her table, her movement graceful but purposeful as she approached the entrance. The restaurant seemed to collectively hold its breath, not because of her celebrity, but because of the quiet intensity radiating from her as she moved toward the developing situation. "Excuse me?" Angelina said, her voice measured but carrying clearly in the now hushed restaurant. "Is there a problem here?" Adam Gutierrez immediately straightened, recognition and a hint of nervousness crossing his face. "Ms. Jolie, everything is fine. Just a small confusion with reservations." Angelina's gaze moved from Adam to Daniel, taking in the situation with the perceptiveness that had made her not just a talented actress, but an effective humanitarian and advocate. "You're a veteran," she stated rather than asked, noticing the same signs Aaron had detected. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied with quiet dignity. "Master Sergeant Daniel Jackson, U.S. Army, retired." Angelina turned back to Adam. "And he had a reservation. That seems to have disappeared despite empty tables being visible in your restaurant?" The question hung in the air, its implication clear to everyone within earshot. Chelsea Johnson had gone silent, her phone still recording, but her running commentary halted as she watched the scene unfold. Aaron Brooks stood up from his table, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who had learned to work through physical discomfort. He approached the group at the entrance, his presence adding another dimension to the unfolding drama. "I couldn't help but overhear," Aaron said, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone used to command. "I'm dining alone while waiting for my daughter. Master Sergeant, I'd be honored if you'd join me at my table. There's plenty of room." The restaurant had fallen completely silent now. Chelsea Johnson's assistant continued filming, capturing what was evolving into something far more significant than restaurant drama for social media consumption. This was becoming a moment of reckoning, a collision of worlds, privilege confronting prejudice, superficiality meeting substance. Daniel looked between Aaron and Angelina, recognizing the genuine respect in both their offers. Before he could respond, Chelsea's voice cut through the silence, her influencer instincts unable to resist injecting herself into what was clearly becoming a viral moment. "Oh my God, this is so inspirational," she gushed, rising from her table and approaching, with her phone now held in selfie position. "Angelina Jolie standing up for veterans' rights. My followers are going to be so moved by this. Can I get a quick statement from all of you? This is totally going to raise awareness." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. As Angelina slowly turned toward Chelsea, her expression calm, but her eyes reflecting a storm of controlled anger. Aaron and Daniel exchanged a brief glance, the wordless communication of those who had faced real conflict, recognizing the hollow performance of someone who treated others' dignity as content. What Angelina said next would indeed shake the room, forcing everyone present to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, respect, and what it truly means to stand up for others. But her words weren't meant for likes or shares. They were meant to cut through the noise and remind everyone of the humanity that connected them all. The tension in Bellissimo continued to build as Angelina Jolie regarded Chelsea Johnson with a composed but penetrating gaze. The influencer's phone remained raised, recording the moment, though her smile had begun to falter under Angelina's scrutiny. "This isn't content," Angelina said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly through the hushed restaurant. "This is a human being who served his country being denied the dignity he's earned, and you want to use that for engagement." Chelsea's camera wavered slightly. "I'm just trying to spread awareness. My platform reaches millions." "Turn it off," Angelina interrupted, not raising her voice but infusing it with an authority that came from years of witnessing real human suffering across the globe. "Not everything is for public consumption, and certainly not someone else's humiliation." Aaron Brooks stepped forward, positioning himself subtly between Chelsea's camera and Daniel Jackson. "The young lady is right about one thing," he said with measured calmness. "This moment deserves awareness, but not as entertainment. It deserves reflection." Daniel Jackson maintained his dignity throughout, his military bearing evident in his straight posture and controlled expression. "I didn't come here looking for trouble or attention. I just wanted dinner at a restaurant where I made a reservation." Chelsea slowly lowered her phone, the reality of the situation finally penetrating her content creator mindset. Around them, other diners had become uncomfortable witnesses, some averting their eyes, while others watched with growing awareness of the injustice unfolding. Adam Gutierrez, the restaurant manager, shifted nervously. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Let me check the system again." "There's no misunderstanding," Angelina stated firmly. "I've been coming to Bellissimo for years, and I've never seen a reservation disappear for someone who wasn't a person of color." The accusation hung in the air, impossible to dismiss. Several patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, confronted with a reality that many preferred to ignore in their privileged spaces. From another table, a woman rose and approached. Michelle Walker, a regular at Bellissimo who had been quietly observing the situation, addressed Adam directly. "I arrived 20 minutes ago without a reservation, and you found me a table immediately. If you're at capacity now, that means my table should have gone to this gentleman who actually had a reservation." Adam's face flushed with embarrassment as more eyes turned toward him. The systematic nature of the discrimination was becoming impossible to deny or disguise as a simple mistake. Chelsea, seemingly sensing that the narrative was shifting away from a feel-good moment she could capitalize on to something more complex and challenging, attempted to redirect. "This is exactly why we need more diversity and inclusion in exclusive spaces. My followers and I are huge advocates for—" "Are you?" Angelina interrupted, her gaze piercing through Chelsea's practiced persona. "Because I noticed when Master Sergeant Jackson first entered, before anyone else had reacted, you were filming his difficulty and narrating it as entertainment. You weren't advocating, you were exploiting." Chelsea's assistant, still holding the phone, though no longer recording, looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the vicinity. Daniel Jackson cleared his throat. "With respect, I appreciate everyone's concern, but I don't want to be the center of a public spectacle. I just want to be treated with the same respect as any other patron." Aaron nodded in understanding. "And that's exactly what should happen." He turned to address Adam Gutierrez directly. "I think it's time for you to make this right, sir." Before Adam could respond, the restaurant's owner emerged from the back office, drawn by the unusual silence in his normally lively establishment. Michael Spencer, a man whose silver hair and tailored suit projected authority, surveyed the scene with concern. "What's happening here, Adam?" he asked, his gaze moving between the group at the entrance. Angelina stepped forward. "Discrimination is happening here, Michael. A decorated veteran with a confirmed reservation was being denied seating, while others without reservations were accommodated." Michael's expression tightened. He had built Bellissimo's reputation over decades and was known for running a tight ship. "Is this true, Adam?" Under the collective gaze of Bellissimo's patrons, Adam struggled to find words. There was confusion. With the reservation system, that only seemed to affect one person, Aaron interjected calmly. Michael Spencer turned to Daniel Jackson. Master Sergeant, on behalf of Bellissimo, I offer my sincere apologies. This is not how we conduct business, and it's certainly not how we treat those who have served our country. Throughout the restaurant, the atmosphere had transformed. What began as an uncomfortable confrontation had evolved into a moment of collective reckoning. Several other diners had stood up, some approaching to offer their own apologies or support. Chelsea Johnson, seeing the genuine emotion in the room, had the grace to look ashamed. She put her phone away completely. I'm sorry. I didn't understand. What was happening? I thought I was helping by bringing attention to it. Angelina's expression softened slightly. Intention matters, but impact matters more. Real advocacy isn't about creating content, it's about creating change. The restaurant owner turned to Adam. We'll discuss this further in private. For now, please ensure Master Sergeant Jackson is seated at our finest table. As Adam moved to comply, Daniel shook his head. That won't be necessary. I don't want special treatment, just equal treatment. Aaron Brooks nodded with understanding and respect. If my offer still stands, I'd be honored to share my table, soldier to soldier. Daniel considered for a moment, then nodded. I'd appreciate that, thank you. As the two veterans moved toward Aaron's table, the tension in the restaurant began to dissipate, replaced by subdued conversation and reflection. Angelina returned to her own table, declining the owner's profuse thanks with a simple shake of her head. Chelsea remained standing near the entrance, her carefully curated image momentarily stripped away, revealing the uncertainty beneath. After a moment's hesitation, she approached Angelina's table. Ms. Jolie, she began, her voice lacking its usual polished confidence. May I speak with you for a moment? Angelina gestured to the empty chair across from her. Of course, at Aaron's table, the two veterans had settled into conversation, their shared experiences bridging the gap between strangers. Daniel's posture had relaxed slightly, the dignity that had carried him through the confrontation still present, but softened by the mutual respect of a fellow soldier. 22 years, Aaron was saying, most of it in communications and intelligence. You? 18 years, combat engineering, Daniel replied, until this happened. He gestured subtly toward his prosthetic leg. Aaron nodded, understanding without needing elaboration. My daughter's on her way. She's a surgeon at Veterans Affairs. You'd like her. She doesn't take nonsense from anyone, including her old man. Daniel smiled, perhaps his first genuine smile of the evening. Sounds like someone I'd get along with. At Angelina's table, Chelsea sat with uncharacteristic stillness, her usual performative energy subdued. I've followed your humanitarian work for years, Chelsea admitted, but I never really understood it. I thought advocacy was about bringing attention to causes, using my platform to raise awareness. Angelina regarded her thoughtfully. Awareness is only the beginning. Real change happens when we're willing to be uncomfortable, to confront our own biases, to act when no one is watching or filming. I realized something tonight, Chelsea said quietly. I have millions of followers, but I've never really led them anywhere meaningful. I've influenced purchases, trends, aesthetics, but not values or actions. The conversation between them continued, evolving from awkward apology to genuine exchange. Across the restaurant, other diners had resumed their meals, though the atmosphere remained thoughtful, the evening's events having left an impression that would linger long after the gourmet dishes were consumed. At the veterans' table, Benjamin Gardner had returned with Daniel's menu. It's an honor to serve both of you tonight, he said with genuine respect. My grandfather was in Vietnam. He always said the measure of a society is how it treats those who sacrificed for it. As Benjamin walked away, Daniel looked around the restaurant, his expression contemplative. You know what's interesting? This isn't the first time something like this has happened to me, but it is the first time others stood up before I had to fight the battle myself. Aaron nodded slowly. That's how change really happens. Not when the marginalized have to demand their dignity, but when others recognize their responsibility to ensure it. The evening continued to unfold, the initial confrontation giving way to something more profound, connections forming across tables, conversations deepening beyond the superficial exchanges typical of such establishments. Michael Spencer had ensured that both veterans' meals would be complimentary, though he presented this not as charity but as respect. At one point, Angelina rose from her table where Chelsea still sat, now joined by Angelina's colleague, and approached Aaron and Daniel. "May I join you for a moment?" Both men stood, military courtesy ingrained, and welcomed her to their table. "I wanted to thank you both," Angelina said simply. "Your dignity tonight was a powerful reminder of what true strength looks like." Daniel shook his head slightly. "We should be thanking you. Not everyone with your influence would use it to stand up for a stranger." "That's where you're wrong," Angelina replied. "Using privilege to address injustice isn't exceptional. It should be expected. The exceptional ones are those like you who serve knowing that the country you protect might not always protect you in return." Their conversation continued, touching on Angelina's work with veterans organizations and the challenges many faced upon returning to civilian life. What had begun as an ugly incident had transformed into an evening of meaningful connection, bridging worlds that often remained separate despite existing in the same spaces. As the night progressed, Amanda Kim finally arrived, apologizing profusely to her father for her lateness. Aaron introduced her to Daniel and Angelina, the unusual gathering at their table drawing curious but respectful glances from other patrons. Chelsea, still seated with Angelina's colleague, watched the interaction from across the room. Her phone remained in her purse, the compulsion to document everything for content having given way to genuine presence in the moment. Her assistant had long since stopped filming, instead engaging in actual conversation with those at neighboring tables. Outside Bellissimo, the city of Los Angeles continued its eternal rhythm of traffic and light, unaware of the small moment of reckoning and growth occurring within the restaurant's elegant walls. But for those present, something had shifted. Perspectives challenged, assumptions confronted, connections forged that would continue beyond this single evening. And for Chelsea Johnson, whose identity had been built around influence without substance, a new understanding was taking root, that true influence wasn't measured in followers or engagement, but in the courage to stand for what matters when it would be easier to simply create content from others' struggles. The following morning, Los Angeles awoke to clear skies and the usual traffic congestion, the city oblivious to the small but significant confrontation that had unfolded at Bellissimo the previous evening. For most of those who had witnessed the event, life continued its forward momentum, the incident perhaps relegated to an anecdote shared over coffee or a moment of reflection during a quiet commute. But for Chelsea Johnson, something fundamental had shifted. She sat in her immaculately designed home office, staring at her content calendar for the day. The schedule was meticulously planned. A morning skincare routine featuring sponsored products, a midday workout with her celebrity trainer, an afternoon unboxing of luxury items, and an evening review of another exclusive restaurant. For the first time, it all felt hollow. Her phone buzzed with notifications, comments, likes, shares, and messages from her millions of followers, all expecting the polished performance they had come to associate with her brand. Chelsea picked up the device, scrolling through the sea of emoji reactions and superficial compliments that had once been the validation she craved. "What am I really contributing?" she whispered to the empty room. Her assistant, Kayla Coleman, arrived precisely on schedule, tablet in hand with the day's itinerary already pulled up. "Good morning. The skincare sponsors called to confirm you'll be featuring their new serum prominently. They're offering an additional 20,000 if you can make it the focal point of today's morning routine video." Chelsea nodded absently, still scrolling through her phone. "Is everything okay?" Kayla asked, noticing her boss's unusual quietness. "You haven't posted anything since yesterday afternoon. Your engagement metrics are showing a slight dip." "I was at Bellissimo last night," Chelsea said, finally looking up. "Something happened." "Oh?" Kayla set down her tablet, curiosity piqued. "Something we can use for content." The question hung in the air, a perfect encapsulation of the mindset Chelsea had cultivated in her team and herself. Every experience evaluated for its potential to generate likes and views. "No," she said firmly. "Not everything is content, Kayla. Sometimes things happen that make you question everything." Across town, in a modest apartment near the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, Daniel Jackson was preparing for his physical therapy appointment. The confrontation at Bellissimo had been mentally draining, stirring up emotions he usually kept carefully controlled. Discrimination wasn't new to him. He had faced it before and during his military service, and certainly after returning home with a visible disability. What was new was having others stand up before he had to advocate for himself. His phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. Normally he would let unknown calls go to voicemail, but something prompted him to answer. "Master Sergeant Jackson," came a familiar voice. "This is Aaron Brooks from last night. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Daniel smiled, genuine warmth spreading through him at the unexpected connection. "Not at all, sir. Good to hear from you." "I wanted to check in," Aaron said, the sincerity in his voice evident even through the phone connection. "Yesterday was, well, it shouldn't have happened." "But it did," Daniel replied, his tone matter-of-fact rather than bitter. "And honestly, the outcome was better than most similar situations I've experienced." There was a pause on the line before Aaron continued. "My daughter and I were talking after you left. Amanda works with a lot of veterans at the hospital, and she mentioned that there's a support group that meets weekly, not just for physical rehabilitation, but for the other challenges that come with civilian reintegration. I thought you might be interested." Daniel considered this. He had avoided such groups in the past, preferring to handle his struggles privately. But something about the genuine connection he had felt with Aaron and his daughter made him reconsider. "When and where?" he asked. As they exchanged details, another conversation was taking place at Angelina Jolie's home. The actress sat in a garden, phone to her ear as she spoke with Michael Spencer, Bellissimo's owner. "I've let Adam go," Michael was saying, regret and resolution mingling in his voice. After reviewing security footage and speaking with staff, it became clear this wasn't an isolated incident. There's been a pattern that I should have recognized sooner. "Firing one person doesn't solve systematic problems," Angelina replied, her tone not accusatory but challenging. "What else are you doing?" "I'm implementing mandatory diversity training for all staff, revamping our reservation system for greater transparency, and I've reached out to several veterans organizations to discuss partnership opportunities. But I'd welcome your input on what more we can do." Angelina smiled slightly, appreciating his willingness to go beyond token gestures. "It's a start, Michael. Real change takes time and consistent effort. I know someone who runs an excellent program, helping businesses examine their unconscious biases. I'll send you her information." As these conversations unfolded across the city, Chelsea Johnson sat at her computer, the blinking cursor on a blank document reflecting her inner conflict. After dismissing her puzzled assistant with instructions to reschedule the day's content creation, she had begun drafting something entirely different from her usual posts. "Last night, I witnessed something that made me question everything about the platform I've built," she typed, then paused, considering the potential backlash from sponsors who expected only positive, aspirational content from her. With a deep breath, she continued typing. The words flowed more easily than expected, perhaps because they came from genuine reflection rather than calculated engagement strategy. At the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, Daniel arrived for his physical therapy session, his mind still processing the events of the previous evening. His therapist, April Martin, noticed his thoughtful expression. "You seem different today," she observed as she helped him adjust the equipment for his exercises. "More present," Daniel smiled slightly. "Had an interesting dinner last night." "Oh? Somewhere special?" "Bellissimo," he replied, watching her eyebrows raise in surprise. "But it wasn't the food that made it memorable." As he briefly recounted the experience, April's expression shifted from surprise to anger to a kind of resigned understanding. "Unfortunately, that doesn't shock me. What does surprise me is that others stood up. That doesn't happen enough." "No, it doesn't," Daniel agreed, adjusting his prosthetic. "But when it does, it matters." Their session continued, the physical exertion providing a welcome focus away from deeper thoughts. As Daniel worked through his exercises, his phone vibrated with an incoming email. He would check it later, unaware that its contents would connect the scattered threads of last night's confrontation in unexpected ways. Back at her home, Chelsea had finished writing her post, the most honest thing she had ever shared online. Her finger hovered over the publish button, a moment of hesitation seizing her as she considered the potential consequences. This wasn't the carefully curated content her followers expected. This was raw, real, and potentially damaging to the brand she had built. What would Angelina do? She murmured to herself, recalling the actress's unwavering commitment to speaking truth despite consequences. With newfound resolve, Chelsea pressed publish. Her message began spreading through her extensive network of followers, many reacting with surprise at the uncharacteristic vulnerability from an influencer known for portraying a perfect life. At Angelina's home, her phone chimed with a notification. One of her staff members who monitored social media had forwarded something they thought might interest her. A post from Chelsea Johnson that was rapidly gaining attention for its unexpected honesty. Angelina read the message, a small smile forming, as she recognized the genuine reflection behind the words. Perhaps last night's confrontation had sparked something meaningful after all. As the day progressed, the ripples from Bellissimo continued to spread. Michael Spencer had called an all-staff meeting at the restaurant, implementing immediate changes to their reservation and seating policies. Benjamin Gardner, the server who had shown genuine respect to both veterans, was promoted to head waiter, with Michael citing his exemplary demonstration of our true values. Aaron Brooks arrived home from his volunteer work at the local Veterans Center, finding his daughter Amanda preparing dinner in his kitchen. Their relationship had deepened over the years, especially after he had lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. Amanda's dedication to serving veterans through her medical practice was a source of immense pride for him. "You'll never guess who called today," he said, washing his hands at the kitchen sink. The president," Amanda joked, stirring a pot of her father's favorite stew, almost as surprising. "Angelina Jolie." Amanda nearly dropped her spoon. "What? Why?" Aaron dried his hands, his expression thoughtful. "She's organizing a private dinner next week. Apparently, last night made her realize there's an opportunity to bring together people who wouldn't normally connect. She's invited us, you, me, and Master Sergeant Jackson." "That's unexpected," Amanda replied, processing the information. Who else will be there? She didn't give a complete guest list, but she mentioned that restaurant owner Michael Spencer and, surprisingly, that influencer who was trying to film everything. The one you said was more concerned with content than compassion. That seems like an odd choice, Aaron shrugged. Angelina seemed to think the young woman had a genuine awakening of sorts. Said something about a post she made today that's getting a lot of attention. Amanda pulled out her phone, quickly searching for Chelsea Johnson's latest content. Her eyebrows rose as she read the uncharacteristically reflective post that had already garnered hundreds of thousands of interactions. Wow, she said simply, showing the screen to her father. Maybe people can change, with the right catalyst, Aaron agreed. Sometimes, all it takes is witnessing true integrity in action to recognize what you've been missing in your own life. As evening approached, Daniel Jackson finished reviewing the email that had arrived during his physical therapy session. It was from Michael Spencer, containing both a formal apology and an invitation to the private dinner Angelina was organizing. Daniel read it twice, considering his response carefully. His instinct was to decline. He hadn't sought attention or special treatment. He had simply wanted to be treated with the same respect afforded to any other person. But something about the sincerity of the invitation and the opportunity to continue the meaningful connections that had begun forming the previous night gave him pause. With deliberate keystrokes, he composed his reply, accepting the invitation with dignity and grace, the same qualities that had carried him through countless challenges, both on the battlefield and in the country he had returned home to serve. As night fell over Los Angeles, the city continued its relentless pace, millions of lives intersecting briefly before continuing on their separate paths. But for a group of individuals, those paths had converged in a way that would not easily be forgotten or dismissed. A confrontation that could have ended in bitterness had instead planted seeds of connection, reflection, and perhaps even growth. Chelsea Johnson sat in her darkened living room, watching the responses to her honest post continue to accumulate. Among the supportive messages and critical comments was a private message from Angelina Jolie, brief but meaningful, acknowledging Chelsea's courage in publicly examining her own behavior and extending an invitation to continue the conversation. In person, at the upcoming dinner, for the first time in years, Chelsea found herself excited about an event not for its content potential or networking opportunities, but for the genuine human connection it promised. She typed a simple acceptance, then set her phone aside, allowing herself to simply exist in the moment without documenting or performing it. Across the city, others were similarly reflecting on connections formed and lessons learned. Benjamin Gardner called his grandfather, eager to share the story of serving two decorated veterans and standing witness to a moment of genuine accountability. Michael Spencer reviewed applications from diversity consultants committed to ensuring Bellissimo became a truly welcoming space for all. And Angelina continued planning the upcoming dinner, recognizing the potential for meaningful change that could emerge from bringing together such different perspectives united by a shared experience. The confrontation at Bellissimo had lasted only minutes, but its impact continued to expand, touching lives and challenging perspectives in ways that would continue long after the details of the evening had faded from memory. In a city often criticized for its superficiality, a moment of authentic humanity had created ripples of change that promised to reach far beyond those directly involved. And it had all begun with the simple courage of standing up for what was right, even when it would have been easier to remain seated and silent. 1 week later, as the sun began its descent over the Hollywood Hills, casting the city in a golden hue, preparations were underway at Angelina Jolie's private residence. Unlike the opulent showiness of many celebrity homes, her space reflected her humanitarian values, elegant but purposeful, with artifacts from her global travels displayed not as exotic trophies, but as respectful acknowledgements of diverse cultures. In Angelina, the garden, a long table had been arranged under the canopy of mature olive trees. String lights twinkled overhead, creating an atmosphere of intimate warmth rather than ostentatious display. The setting was deliberately chosen, not a restaurant or public venue, but a personal space where genuine conversation could flourish without performance or pretense. Angelina moved among the staff with quiet authority, adjusting details and ensuring everything was in place. This dinner wasn't a publicity stunt or a photo opportunity. No press had been invited, no social media announcement made. It was simply an attempt to nurture the connections that had begun forming during that charged evening at Bellissimo. "Ms. Jolie," called her assistant Heather Fisher, "your first guests have arrived." Aaron Brooks and his daughter Amanda approached from the main house, escorted by a staff member. Aaron walked with the straight-back dignity that years of military service had ingrained, while Amanda carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions in operating rooms. "Thank you for inviting us," Aaron said, shaking Angelina's hand with genuine warmth. "This is quite different from our last meeting." Angelina smiled. "That's the intention. I thought we could all use a space to connect without the tension of that night." As they exchanged pleasantries, Daniel Jackson arrived, moving with the measured gait that his prosthetic leg necessitated. He had dressed formally for the occasion, his military decorations discreetly pinned to his lapel, not displayed for attention, but worn as a matter of personal honor and identity. "Master Sergeant," Angelina greeted him, extending her hand. "I'm so glad you could join us." Daniel shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for the invitation, though I must admit I'm still trying to understand why my being denied a table warranted all of this attention." "Because it wasn't just about a table," Amanda interjected, stepping forward to introduce herself properly. "It was about dignity and respect, things too often denied to those who've sacrificed the most." Daniel's expression softened slightly as he recognized the genuine understanding in her words. "Dr. Kim, your father speaks very highly of you and your work with veterans." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Michael Spencer, Bellissimo's owner, who approached with a mixture of determination and humility. He carried a bottle of wine, not as a casual hostess gift, but as a symbolic peace offering. "Good evening," he said, his usual confident demeanor tempered by the circumstances of their gathering. "Thank you for including me in this conversation. I know my presence might not be welcome to everyone here." Before anyone could respond, another arrival drew their attention. Chelsea Johnson stood at the garden entrance, notably without her usual entourage of assistants or recording devices. For perhaps the first time in her public life, she was simply present as herself, without the filter of performance or documentation. "I late?" she asked, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice. Angelina moved to welcome her. "Not at all. We're just getting started." As the group settled around the table, the initial awkwardness was palpable. These were people connected by a single charged incident, now attempting to bridge vastly different life experiences and perspectives. Benjamin Gardner, the server from Bellissimo who had been invited at Michael's suggestion, arrived last, completing their unusual gathering. "Before we begin dinner," Angelina said once everyone was seated, "I want to be clear about my intention for tonight. This isn't about publicity or performative reconciliation. It's about continuing a conversation that began under difficult circumstances, one that I believe has the potential to create meaningful understanding." She raised her glass in a simple toast to honest conversation and uncomfortable growth. As the first course was served, The conversation began cautiously, each person finding their footing in this unusual social configuration. Michael Spencer, perhaps feeling the weight of accountability most directly, was the first to address the elephant in the room. "I've spent the past week examining every aspect of how Bellissimo operates," he said, his gaze moving respectfully to Daniel. "What happened to you, Master Sergeant, wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of systematic biases that I allowed to develop under my watch." Daniel nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without immediately absolving him. "What are you doing about it?" "Complete overhaul of our reservation system for transparency, mandatory training for all staff, and I've established a partnership with the Veterans Employment Initiative to create pathways for veterans entering civilian hospitality careers." Michael paused, then added, "It's not enough, but it's a start." Benjamin, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "The changes are already noticeable. There's a different atmosphere among the staff, more awareness, more accountability." Chelsea, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally joined the conversation. "My post about what happened that night has over 3 million engagements now," she said, then quickly added, "But that's not the point. What matters is the messages I've received from followers sharing similar experiences, both as witnesses and recipients of discrimination." "And how are you responding to those messages?" Amanda asked, her tone curious rather than accusatory. Chelsea met her gaze directly. "By listening, by using my platform to amplify voices that usually go unheard. It's changing how I think about influence." Aaron, who had been quietly observing the exchanges, nodded with approval. "Influence without purpose is just noise, but when directed toward meaningful change, it becomes power." As the dinner progressed through subsequent courses, the conversation deepened. Daniel shared some of his experiences returning to civilian life after his injury, the physical challenges certainly, but also the more insidious hurdles of prejudice and assumption. "The hardest part isn't the leg," he explained, gesturing toward his prosthetic. "It's the daily reminder that parts of society see you as either a hero to be placed on a pedestal or a burden to be managed. Very few see you simply as a human, being deserving of basic dignity." Amanda nodded in understanding. "I see that with my patients every day. The system treats the physical injuries, but often ignores the dignity wounds." "Dignity wounds," Angelina repeated thoughtfully. "That's a powerful phrase." Chelsea, who had been listening intently, looked troubled. "I've been thinking about how my content might have contributed to those dignity wounds without my realizing it. All those inspiration porn posts of people with disabilities that I've shared without context or consent." "Awareness is the first step toward change," Daniel said, his tone not condemning, but encouraging. "What matters is what you do with that awareness going forward." As the main course concluded and dessert was served, Michael Spencer addressed Benjamin directly. "I've been meaning to tell you, your promotion has been formalized. The board unanimously approved making you our new dining room manager." Benjamin looked surprised. Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," Michael replied honestly. "You earned it by demonstrating the values we should have been upholding all along." The conversation continued to flow more naturally as the evening progressed, shifting from the specific incident at Bellissimo to broader discussions of accountability, advocacy, and authentic action. Chelsea spoke of her struggle to reconcile her influencer career with her emerging understanding of meaningful impact. "For years, I measured success in followers and engagement," she admitted. "Now, I'm questioning whether I've ever actually accomplished anything that matters." "It's never too late to redirect your influence," Angelina responded. "The platform you've built can be a powerful tool for change if used with intention and authenticity." Aaron, who had been relatively quiet throughout much of the dinner, finally, shared some of his own military experiences, not the glorified war stories often expected from veterans, but honest reflections on the complex realities of service and sacrifice. "We don't serve for recognition or special treatment," he said, his gaze meeting Daniel's in shared understanding. "But we do deserve basic respect, as does every human being." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. I didn't want special accommodation at Bellissimo. I just wanted the reservation I had confirmed to be honored, like anyone else's would be." As the evening drew to a close, the initial awkwardness had dissolved into genuine connection. Barriers of celebrity, profession, and life experience had not disappeared, but they had become permeable, allowing for authentic exchange across divides that might otherwise have seemed unbridgeable. Angelina raised her glass once more. "I'd like to propose another toast, not to neat resolutions or performative unity, but to the messy, ongoing work of becoming better as individuals and as a society." The glasses clinked in agreement, the sound carrying through the garden as stars began to appear in the darkening sky above. As the guests prepared to depart, Chelsea approached Daniel somewhat hesitantly. "Master Sergeant Jackson, I've been wanting to apologize properly for my behavior that night. Treating your experience as content was inexcusable." Daniel regarded her thoughtfully. "Apology accepted. But more important than your apology is what you do next." "I'm trying to figure that out," she admitted. "For the first time in my career, I'm questioning everything about how I use my platform." "That questioning is valuable," he replied. "Just make sure it leads to action, not just more." "Content about questioning." Chelsea nodded, accepting the challenge in his words. Nearby, Amanda was exchanging contact information with Benjamin, their conversation having revealed shared interests in community organizing and local politics. Aaron watched with approval. His daughter had always been drawn to people of substance and principle. Michael Spencer approached Angelina as the gathering dispersed. "Thank you for creating this space," he said sincerely. "It would have been easier for you to simply make a public statement condemning Bellissimo and move on. Easier, perhaps, but not more effective," she replied. "Real change happens through sustained engagement, not performative outrage." As the guests departed one by one, each carrying away new perspectives and connections, Angelina remained in the garden, reflecting on the evening. The confrontation at Bellissimo had been a catalyst, but what would grow from it remained to be seen. Change, real, lasting change, required ongoing commitment beyond a single charged moment or a well-intentioned dinner. 3 months later, the ripples from that evening at Bellissimo continued to spread in unexpected ways. Daniel Jackson stood before a group of restaurant managers and staff, his posture military straight, but his expression open and engaged. He had partnered with Michael Spencer to develop a training program addressing unconscious bias in hospitality settings, drawing on his own experiences to illustrate the subtle ways discrimination manifested in supposedly welcoming spaces. "It's not about blame or shame," he explained to the attentive audience. "It's about awareness and action." In the back of the room, Aaron Brooks and his daughter Amanda observed with quiet pride. Their friendship with Daniel had deepened over the intervening months, evolving from the unusual circumstances of their meeting into a genuine bond based on shared values and mutual respect. Across town, Chelsea Johnson sat in a television studio, preparing for a live interview about her dramatic pivot from lifestyle influencer to advocate for digital responsibility and authentic representation. Her followers had initially declined when she shifted her content away from aspirational luxury toward meaningful engagement with social issues, but a core audience had remained, joined by new followers drawn to her increasingly thoughtful and substantive platform. "5 minutes, Ms. Johnson," called a production assistant. Chelsea nodded, reviewing her talking points one last time. Among them was a reference to the night that changed everything, her shorthand for the confrontation at Bellissimo that had forced her to confront the hollow nature of influence without purpose. At Bellissimo itself, Benjamin Gardner had implemented numerous changes as the new dining room manager. The reservation system now operated with complete transparency. Staff training included substantial components on equity and inclusion, and a monthly dinner program provided free meals to veterans and their families. The restaurant's reputation had not suffered from these changes. In fact, it had enhanced its standing as a place of genuine hospitality rather than mere exclusivity. "Table for Jackson, party of 4, Benjamin announced, checking the reservation system with a warm smile. The restaurant was booked solid, as it had been consistently since the incident that had prompted its transformation. Daniel Jackson arrived, precisely on time, accompanied by Aaron, Amanda, and a representative from the veterans organization that had partnered with Bellissimo. Their monthly strategy meeting had become a tradition, combining business with the pleasure of shared meals and deepening friendship. "Good evening, Mr. Gardner," Daniel greeted, the formality of their initial meeting having given way to mutual respect. "Your table is ready," Benjamin replied, leading them to a prime spot that Michael Spencer now personally ensured was reserved for their regular gatherings. As they settled in, Amanda's phone buzzed with a notification. "Looks like Chelsea's interview is about to start," she said, showing the screen to the others. "Should we ask Benjamin to turn on the bar TV?" Daniel nodded. "I'm curious to see how she handles this one. The morning shows can be pretty superficial." Benjamin arranged for the television to be switched to the appropriate channel, where Chelsea Johnson was now seated across from a host, known more for entertaining banter than substantive discussion. "So, Chelsea," the host began with a practiced smile, "you've gone from showcasing luxury products and exclusive experiences to talking about social responsibility and inclusive representation. Some might call that a dramatic rebrand. What prompted this change?" The camera focused on Chelsea, who appeared thoughtful rather than defensive. The polished perfection of her influencer persona remained, but there was an authenticity to her expression that had previously been absent. "It wasn't a strategic rebrand," she replied, her voice steady. "It was a personal awakening. I witnessed something that forced me to confront the emptiness of influence without purpose." "You're referring to an incident at a restaurant?" the host prompted. Chelsea nodded. "Yes, but it's not my story to tell. What matters is what I learned from it. That using my platform responsibly means amplifying important conversations rather than just creating content from them." At their table, Daniel exchanged a glance with Aaron. "She's come a long way," he observed quietly. Aaron nodded. "Growth often begins with discomfort." She had the courage to lean into it rather than retreat. On screen, the interview continued, with Chelsea deftly steering the conversation towards substantive issues rather than allowing it to remain on the surface level of her personal transformation. "The biggest lesson," she was saying, "was understanding that real advocacy isn't about creating content centered on yourself. It's about creating space for voices that need to be heard." The host, clearly expecting a lighter conversation, adjusted his approach. "You've lost some followers since this shift. Does that concern you?" Chelsea smiled. "I've lost followers who were there for aspirational content, yes. But I've gained ones who want to engage with meaningful issues. The metrics that matter to me have changed." As the interview concluded, Amanda turned to Daniel. "She mentioned that you're collaborating on a project. Is that public knowledge yet?" Daniel shook his head. "Not officially, but I don't mind sharing with friends. We're developing a series highlighting veterans' experiences transitioning to civilian life." The challenges, certainly, but also the strengths and perspectives they bring to their communities. That sounds valuable, Amanda replied. Will you be on camera? Behind it, mostly, Daniel said with a slight smile. I'm more comfortable helping shape the narrative than being its face. Their conversation was interrupted as Michael Spencer approached their table, greeting each of them warmly before addressing Daniel directly. I wanted to share some news, he said, his expression reflecting genuine pride. The Hospitality Industry Association has approved our proposal. The training program you helped develop will be implemented as a standard component of certification for all member establishments. Daniel's usual reserve gave way to a broad smile. That's significant. Systemic change rather than just individual improvement. Exactly, Michael agreed, and it wouldn't have happened without your willingness to channel a negative experience into constructive action. As their dinner continued, the conversation flowed easily between professional developments and personal connections. What had begun as a confrontation had evolved into collaboration, creating ripples of change that extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. Across town, Angelina Jolie was reviewing proposals for her foundation's next initiative when her assistant brought in a tablet displaying Chelsea's interview. She watched with quiet satisfaction as the young woman articulated principles of responsible influence and authentic advocacy with conviction and nuance. Remarkable transformation, her assistant commented. Angelina nodded. Sometimes people just need to witness true integrity to recognize what they've been missing in their own lives. She returned to her work, knowing that the dinner she had hosted months earlier had been just one small catalyst in a much larger process of change. The real work had been done by each individual choosing day after day to move forward with greater awareness and purpose. 6 months after the incident at Bellissimo, a ceremony was held at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, honoring the launch of a new program designed to support veterans facing discrimination in civilian settings. The initiative, born from the collaboration between Daniel Jackson's advocacy work and Amanda Kim's medical expertise, had secured significant funding from both government sources and private donors, including a substantial contribution from Chelsea Johnson's foundation. The ceremony was small but meaningful, attended by those who had been instrumental in bringing the program to life. Angelina Jolie stood quietly at the back, preferring to let others take center stage for their work. This program will provide not just legal support, but also community connection, Daniel explained to the gathered audience. Because dignity isn't just about fighting wrongs, it's about creating spaces where respect is the foundation, not the exception. As he spoke, his gaze moved across the faces of those who had become unexpected allies in this journey. Aaron Brooks, whose friendship had provided steady support. Amanda Kim, whose medical expertise had shaped the program's health components. Michael Spencer, whose commitment to change had extended far beyond his own restaurant. Benjamin Gardner, whose quiet integrity had been a constant reminder of how individual actions matter. Chelsea Johnson, whose transformation from content creator to meaningful advocate had brought valuable resources and attention to the cause. And Angelina Jolie, whose initial stand had been the catalyst for connections that might otherwise never have formed. After the formal presentations concluded, the group gathered in a quiet corner of the reception, their unusual bond having deepened. Through months of purposeful collaboration, I've been thinking about that night at Bellissimo, Aaron said reflectively, how easily it could have ended differently. If Angelina hadn't spoken up, Daniel agreed, or if you hadn't offered to share your table, or if Chelsea had continued filming instead of listening, Amanda added. Chelsea smiled ruefully. I was so caught up in creating content that I almost missed the actual moment. I'm grateful every day that something made me stop and really see what was happening. That's the thing about turning points, Angelina observed quietly. They're rarely recognized in the moment. It's only in looking back that we see how a single decision can alter the course of many lives. Michael raised his glass in a subtle toast to turning points then, and to the courage to make the right decision when it would be easier to remain silent. As their glasses clinked together, the sound seemed to underscore the truth they had all come to understand through their unexpected connection, that real change rarely comes from grand gestures or public pronouncements, but from individual moments of integrity multiplied across countless interactions, each person choosing, in their own way, to stand up rather than remain seated when confronted with injustice. Outside the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, Los Angeles continued its eternal rhythm, largely unaware of the small ceremony taking place within its walls. But for those gathered in that quiet corner, something profound had been affirmed, the power of a single moment of courage to create ripples that continue long after the initial splash has faded from memory. And somewhere across the city, another confrontation was unfolding. Another opportunity for someone to choose dignity over comfort, respect over convenience, courage over complicity. The cycle would continue as it always had, with each small stand for justice creating the possibility for a world slightly better than it had been before. In the end, that was Angelina Jolie's most powerful legacy from that night at Bellissimo. Not the words she had spoken that had indeed shaken the room, but the reminder that such words need to be spoken at all, by anyone who witnesses injustice and has the courage to stand against it.